I said, okay, if I could do 10, I know 6 fits. Is there a way for me to downsize the units a little bit to make them a more attainable price point? Instead of being $8 million each, can we bring the price down on a whole dollar basis, which opens up our market and gives us a bigger buyer pool?
Let's go. Okay, so this is out too. Yeah, so when I first came down here, you had already got the land under contract, and you had already looked at what could be built, and that's why you went ahead and put in the offer that made sense financially. But with that being said, then you actually have to go out and figure out what's not just best to build, but what you can build. And originally, we had the concept design of 6 townhouses. Now we're building 8 townhouse type condos. So do you want to describe a little bit on how we went from the 6 and what impacted it from going to 6 to 8 in the townhouse type, and how we maximize square footage?
Yeah. So I think, I don't, just like most of these things, I don't think that I've told you like the full history of how the search started.
Yeah.
And even with the very beginning of the process I looked at the zoning, I looked at the square feet, and not being an architect, I didn't know exactly how much I could fit, like you said. And I don't have an in-house architect. Stephanie does the interior design, but she doesn't do the site planning. And so the first thing that I did was started contacting some architects around town. And I do this kind of round robin process where I'm trying to decide who I want to work with. And so I'm just getting some ideas, and I will start telling some of the architects, oh, I have this idea. I know that the site is 15,000 square feet. The zoning is the CBD zoning and the central core like subzone. And I know I could put 10 units, but I want to do townhouses, not regular condos because of where it is, and all of kind of the descriptive aspects of it. And the first architects that I started working with actually I didn't like working with them. And we did, I think Steph and I had 2 or 3 meetings with them, and they did a couple of sketches, and they just weren't responsive enough. And the way that the site was coming out, I could tell just wasn't efficient. And then also trying to balance the pro forma aspects, of course. But that we have that 6 unit, that first sketch is like on the wall in the office. And the way that came about was they were looking at the garages and saying, oh, we can have a driveway, we can have garages. And so we could probably put 6. But on the balance of factors, knowing that I could do 10 and thinking about the market dynamics, I said, okay, if I could do 10, I know 6 fits. Is there a way for me to downsize the units a little bit to make them a more attainable price point? Instead of being $8 million each, can we bring the price down on a whole dollar basis, which opens up our market and gives us a bigger buyer pool? And so that was really the kind of the driving force behind it, was having one architect giving me a couple of sketches in one direction, knowing the zoning capacity was almost double that, going from 6 to 10, and then trying to strike the right balance between the market dynamics and the zoning to ultimately arrive at 8 that kind of captured the vision of the townhouse style of projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when I vividly remember as the project started to materialize more and more, especially when the deposits went hard and we brought in the architect that we're going to work with to not just show them what we've come up with, but try and work out how we could maximize the 8. And I know originally we wanted a full driveway pass through. We had no second floor cover of any type of shared garage, but all those came about due to the code and that we couldn't have egress onto.
But not exactly.
Yeah.
The idea for the covering was just an idea that I had while we were having, like Steph and I were having breakfast. And so I had the idea to utilize the space instead of just having like surface parking. And I know you've heard Stephanie talk about how much she hates surface parking lots. I know most people hate surface parking lots. And so a lot of the codes are going away from that. And one of Del Rey's aspects to the driving force behind some of their requirements for having ingress and egress off of alleys rather than off of primary streets is to enhance the pedestrian experience and reduce the vehicular impact on both the aesthetics and also the actual experience of being on the street. And so we had the city with their policy on the one side, and then we had the driveway that cut through out onto US 1 or Southeast 5th Ave. So we had that built in because my original idea was just the flow of traffic. It'd be nicer for the residents to have a full drive through from their parking spaces through to the street. But Southeast 5th is a one-way anyways, right? And the complication that would come with going both against what city policy was, also trying to deal with the state Department of Transportation to get that egress. They said it was okay in our preliminary meetings, but I knew that there's a lot more. Even if you get in a meeting, someone says that something's okay, like at the staff level, you're going to have to go through different groups because I've gone through this on other projects where you have the State Department of Transportation, you have signalization is one department, you have the legal department being the other one, and then that staff level that you're dealing with for the like site plan approval. So I could avoid all of those things and align myself with the city policy by turning off that egress. And I got comfortable with that because I was talking to our traffic engineer and they were looking at the traffic counts and they really look at the flow of what it is the actual residents or buyers will end up doing. And he said it's going to have like almost no impact because the alleyway is 20 feet wide. So it's like almost the size of a street. And so you can have bi-directional traffic on it. And you have coming onto the site from Southeast First, you've got bi-directional traffic. And so you really aren't going to have there's no real benefit to having that egress like I thought. And so it just all made sense to go ahead and eliminate that. So that's all the traffic pattern stuff, but maximizing the use of the space. Like I was saying, that idea to put the pool decks on top and those like outdoor patios that are really like the signature piece of the project. That was just an idea for utilizing what would otherwise have just been like, if you're looking out of your bedroom window, you're going to either look down at your own private space with a pool and landscaping and seating and a very nice experience, or you're going to look out and you're going to see where you and your neighbors are like driving through to go park. And there's no reason not to add that, right? We wanted to have a pool of some kind to be competitive in the market, and putting it over the top of a non-habitable space always makes more sense than trying to put it somewhere that you're going to potentially have issues that would leak into a real, like a living space of some kind. So that's why in Miami, you always see the pool decks on top of the garages.
Yeah, they have issues here with that cold plunge that's on the roof in the steam room that was leaking into the units below. And I know originally...
So they already have that problem in this building?
Yeah. So originally, we had wanted to put them on the roof. Obviously, we put them in a new spot, solved a lot of problems, or allowed for it. It's just a better location for them. Increase the square footage. But also with the tower elements, right? That was something that was in the code that allowed for us to increase the square footage as well, and in some ways bring more light into the project with our architectural style being Anglo-Caribbean. We don't have those floor to ceiling windows everywhere and all glass. So to be able to maximize light coming into the space as well as increase our square footage and not have that setback on the fourth floor for those elements was something that was in the code, right?
Yeah. So this is one of those areas where, as the developer, you have to like work with your designer and push them in a direction that they might not have thought about. And me being also a lawyer and having my JD and reading through the code, rather than just purely relying on the architect or whoever the professionals are, I can dive into the code and see opportunities that might be missed. And so I saw this in Del Rey's code. They have, and a lot of other codes, they have the same type of thing where they have graphics that show what the intent of the legislative text is. And so it wasn't about maximizing the FAR as much as it was about maximizing the experience of the buyer. And so I was looking at, okay, I'm going to build and pay for these nice fourth floor spaces, right? So one, to have the fourth floor space for two different reasons. One was increase the square footage of interior air conditioned space. And the other was thinking about if you're going to have a fourth floor deck, which is obviously much nicer than just having a non-usable roof, those are all things that you're paying for as a buyer and as a developer. So with our buyer pool in particular, a lot of people coming from the Northeast, I was trying to put myself into their mindset, or even mine now that we're going into summer, right? Is that it's very hot outside. It rains a lot. Even if it's raining, it sometimes is nice to be sitting in a really nice living space and having an elevated perspective. And with Del Rey's height limit being 4 stories, you don't always get that. So the setbacks required us to have outdoor space. The decision to put additional indoor space with air conditioning was something I really wanted for the overall experience. And then I found this tower element of you can encroach in the setback with a tower element for vertical transportation only. And the architect had originally proposed having just a spiral staircase that gets you up to the 4th floor.
Yeah, that wouldn't make any sense, not that practical. Who would use that as much? You could take the elevator now from the 1st to the 4th.
Yeah, people would definitely use it less. And so adding that nicer element of having the elevator that goes all the way from 1 up to 4 makes it much better. And then we have a doorway that opens into that interior living space. You would have to have used a spiral staircase and then gone back indoors, which would have been awkward, like from a user experience. And so
if it's raining, if it's a hurricane,
you're not going up there.
If it's 100 degrees and the humidity is unbearable.
But yeah, it's all about finding the opportunities on a psychological basis for what it is you think that your end buyer is going to want, and then finding the design that will work with your team, and then also looking at what those areas are within the law that allow you to do it without having like major issues with whatever your requests are. Like one of our big things is, just as a company, is always to minimize the amount of waivers and exceptions and other types of complications that you're going to need, because a lot of times you can fit a highly marketable product into whatever the legislative constraints are.